back to our sweet child, Adolf Hitler. So we left Hitler off in World War One, and what we're trying to gain is a deeper understanding of Hitler. Who is this real Adolf Hitler? Because the scariest thing about him is not that he started the biggest war ever fought by mankind, not that the war caused tens of millions of people to die. It's not that he created the Holocaust, which killed specifically 6 million Jews, but that's only about half of it. 11 million people were murdered in the Holocaust. So how does this guy that starts off relatively normal, actually in life, how does he grow into the monster that is Adolf Hitler? And that's the scary thing about him. He was elected to the leadership of Germany. This was a democratic process. The very reason you have to take these history classes throughout school, throughout college, is because America tries to educate everyone. That is our first line of defense with democracy. We must have an informed, educated citizenship to vote and protect democracy, because other places such as Germany elected an Adolf Hitler. So we left off with the Where's Waldo picture of which one was Hitler in the picture. I'm sure you figured that out. It had an X above his head. If not, you can go back and look at that video. And one of the great myths of Hitler that we have to bust is exactly what was his experience in World War One. If you watch the History Channel, if you read the Facebook clickbait things, they'll always say that Hitler didn't really do anything in World War One. Hitler is actually a very decorated soldier in World War One for his valor and for his bravery. The naysayers always say, oh, but he was just a messenger boy in World War One. This is absolutely true. Go back to our World War One unit. It was trench warfare. There's no reliable wireless radios in the trenches. The telephone lines were constantly cut, and from the bombardments and from the combat. The only reliable way to get messages back and forth between different areas of the German lines was through human messengers. Both sides used human messengers. And Hitler volunteered to be part of a messenger company. That picture of just 9 guys was actually the survivors of his messenger company. Only 9 of the original 150 survived. This tells you a lot about Hitler's experience in World War One. If you want to disrupt the enemy's plans, you destroy the messenger carriers. And that's what Hitler was. He faced death many times. He was wounded. He was gassed. He had the full World War One experience. The gas attack is probably the most illustrative of his experiences. Remember, Hitler fancies himself an artist. Not just any artist, the next Michelangelo. He views his sight. He views his vision. He values color and light and everything artistic, and he's blinded for 3 days in a gas attack with the possibility of never seeing again. This would also ruin his plan B thing of architecture. He loves the sight of beautiful buildings and sees himself as more intelligent as the classic architects who constructed these buildings, designed these buildings, and without eyesight, his hopes and dreams are just further crushed. So he was scared for those days, and it really made him think about World War One. He was in the trenches all 4 years. He had the full World War One experience, along with millions upon millions of other Germans. Now, another way World War One impacted Hitler was he found a place. He found a home. There are some people, especially a guy like Hitler. Remember, we described Hitler as that daydreaming student who was always reading a book in class, just never the book he was supposed to be reading in class. He really loved his history classes. When you read Hitler's writing, his knowledge of world history is extreme. I had trouble keeping up with his knowledge of world history at times, and I taught world history for a long time. He knew the details. Hated math, though. He was reading classic literature books in math class. He was ignoring the science. He was reading history in other classes and classic literature in other classes, doing whatever he wanted to do, and never really focused, never had structure. When he went up to Vienna to art school, he would wander for days at a time, going to operas, analyzing the music, looking at the architecture in Vienna, stating to his friend how he would have done it better had he been the great architect. Always wandering, always daydreaming, never working, never had structure. Even at the height of World War II, like the day we invaded Normandy, France, June 6, 1944. The biggest invasion ever launched by mankind. Hitler slept till noon. He was never a guy of structure. Some people need structure to be forced on them. Perfect, perfect real world relation here. But none of you have been in school for about a week now. And it's hard on teachers too. When we lose structure, sometimes it gets hard to function. To be honest, it's been hard on me to get up early in the morning to get these videos knocked out. Sometimes I do them in the middle of the night. I don't even know what day it is right now. We lose structure and we lose focus and we lose structure. The army forced that on Adolf Hitler. He loved the army in World War I. He found his place. He found his home. He found what he loved. He figured out what he wanted to do with his life, and that was spend it in the army. He loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. But how did World War I end for the Germans? Once they narrow it down to a one-front war, the Russians withdraw, become communist due to the Russian Revolution, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. The Germans concentrate all their soldiers on the Western Front in the spring of 1918 for one last push to take Paris. Exactly when America shows up and rebalances the war. And so it's always good to keep in mind we never dominated Germany in World War I. That's what sets us up for the classic rematch of World War II. And that's why our goal in World War II will be unconditional surrender. We will beat Germany and Japan down till they beg us to quit so that nobody could ever say, we could have won that. So Hitler's in this World War I thing, and the way it ends is a peace treaty. Germany realizes, well, we're still holding French territory. America's in it. America can supply England and France endlessly with men and bullets. Our soldiers, remember, are called doughboys because they are considered a little fat compared to everybody that's been serving in the trenches for years. We just had endless supplies. We could feed England, we could feed France, and we could supply our own guys weapons and ammunition just almost infinitely. Germany could have fought on, but eventually they will lose because they cannot supply their army infinitely, and that's the big problem they're facing. So they weren't really forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. It's just that they don't sign the Treaty of Versailles, they go back to war. And the next deal they'll get will be even worse. And if you think back to the Treaty of Versailles, we spent a day in class on this, everything that ends World War I begins World War II. Germany is forced to demilitarize the Rhineland. They're forced to allow France to mine coal out of the Saar region for 15 years. They're slapped with those $33 billion in reparations. If you compare your maps again, Germany has shrunk in size. Land is taken away to form Czechoslovakia and Poland, which we'll talk about eventually. As Hitler wants German land back. He thought it had always been German land. And Germany is just humiliated by the peace treaty. And the biggest slap in the face, German military reduced to 100,000 volunteer soldiers with no heavy artillery, airplanes, or submarines by the Treaty of Versailles. So thus, at the end of World War I, Hitler is going to lose the one job he had found in life that he loved. So you could call this Plan D. Hopes and dreams, crushed. Plan A was to be an artist, crushed. Plan B was to be an architect, crushed. Plan C was to be a great composer, crushed. Plan D was to be a soldier, crushed. Imagine the impact this must have on a person's mind. They finally figure life out, and it's ripped away from them, and he's going to lose his job in the German army. He clings and he clings and he clings as best he can till about 1920 before he's eventually booted out of the German army. So again, he's homeless, he's young, he has no family. What to do? He starts drifting home towards southern Germany, Bavaria, where he is from. He just doesn't know what else to do. He has no parents left. His older brother actually lived in England and owned a bar by this time. He had a sister who was having children, so he would visit the children. They called him Uncle Addy, and he gave them little doggy rides, and he played with the kids. Imagine Hitler doing that. So he has nothing to do, no goal in life. And this is where we enter the phrase beer hall. Hitler wanders into a beer hall one night. Now, one of the great ironies of Hitler was he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he was a complete vegetarian, but he has to eat somewhere, and he just has nowhere else to go, so he's just hanging out in this beer hall every Friday night. And in the back room, he hears two guys arguing politics with each other about how cheated Germany had been in the Treaty of Versailles and how they could have won the war. And they're arguing about how they need to make Germany great again, to use a more recent phrase. Hitler comes back week after week to this beer hall to listen to these guys. It takes him weeks to build up the courage. Hitler was somewhat introverted. He's such a complex personality. Remember, he's that kid in class always reading a book. He wasn't really hanging out with the fun guys or the party crowd. He had one girlfriend his entire life. He was that kind of guy that he had some crushes on girls, but never could bring himself to talk to the girls. So that resulted in one girlfriend his entire life, which he marries the last day of Eva Braun, and they die the day they got married. So he's this introverted guy listening to these dudes in a beer hall. And he eventually works up the courage to go talk to these guys. And what he discovers is these guys are forming a new political party called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. If you spelled it out in German, it would translate to Nazi. And every little word there has a meaning. National, Germany first. We must make Germany great again. Socialist, we must help the poor German people who are suffering from World War I, especially the German soldier, the veteran of the war. And Hitler asks eventually for membership in the party. He realizes these guys are somewhat idiotic when he asks for membership. They look at each other and they're not sure what to do. How do we induct a new member? And they go through the formal process of one of them makes a motion, the other one seconds the motion, and they take a vote on inducting Hitler into the Nazi Party. And that's where Hitler realized these guys are idiots. They're all talk and they're all procedure. And I guess you could call this Plan E. He finds his mission in life. He will take over the Nazi Party and make something of the Nazi Party and build it into something bigger and better. He gets a job for the first time in his life, like a real job. And he starts making money, because what these guys do is they'll meet every Friday night and they want to talk about the issues, but it's just the three of them. So he gets a job so he can print up posters and handouts and plaster them all over Munich, Germany, to get more people to come to the meetings. And he starts packing the house, and he starts giving the old speech. And we did this when we did World War I, but one more time, he just starts giving the old speech. The veterans show up to these meetings, and Hitler was able to relate to them and empathize with them. He's able to tell them in his speeches, I understand. I know why you only have one leg. I know why you only have one arm. I know why you're blind. I was gassed in the trenches of World War I. I was shot. I was stabbed. I suffered artillery wounds. Hitler had the full gamut of experiences and could relate to these people. And then he would draw them in to his Hitler trap. That at the end of the war, we still wanted to fight. Picture Paul from All Quiet on the Western Front. Leaves his hometown to go back to fight. He still had the spirit even at the end of the war. He was willing to die for Germany. The soldiers wanted to fight. The Treaty of Versailles stabbed the soldier in the back, and Hitler could tell these guys that in his speeches. It wasn't us that failed Germany in World War I. It was our government that failed us in World War I. They stabbed us in the back. Kaiser Wilhelm gave up the throne at the end of the war. A democratic government was established, and they stabbed us in the back during World War I. It was democracy who stabbed us in the back during World War I and signed that dirty peace treaty. When we asked them why they were doing this, they of course told us, well, we have no guns to give you. We have no ammunition to give you. We have no food to give you. And the soldiers left to wonder, why doesn't our government have ammunition and food? And so you look to the banks. Why don't the banks give the government money to buy ammunition and food? Of course banks want profit, but if Germany is about to be destroyed, shouldn't the banks stand up for Germany and save the very country which has allowed them to profit? The factories, why don't they just give the German soldier food, bullets, ammunition, whatever the German soldier needs? Why are the factories demanding payment? Shouldn't good patriotic German factories just give up the food, the ammunition, the bullets? Shouldn't the banks give the government the money to buy food, ammunition, and bullets? Shouldn't all Germans pull together for the good of Germany at the end of World War I? And of course, the common conclusion they can all reach is somebody has betrayed us. Somebody has stabbed us in the back. And so you start looking at who owns the factories and the banks. And this is where you go way back into history. This is where you connect the Holocaust to the whole thing. This is where you connect how Hitler manipulated the history of the Jews and uses it to get himself in power in Germany. The Jews, of course, started in Jerusalem. After the death of Jesus, they still could not get along with the Roman Empire, who expected everyone in the Roman Empire to worship the Roman Emperor. They didn't really care what religion you were. You could still worship the Greek gods, the Egyptian gods, didn't matter, as long as you worshiped the Roman Emperor too. And of course, the first rule to being Jewish or Christian in those days was there is only one God. And so the Romans and the Jews were constantly butting heads with each other. Eventually the Romans round up all the Jews, sell them in slavery across the entire Roman Empire. So they circle the Mediterranean Sea, Jews end up in Spain, France, and England. The Middle Ages come. The Catholic Church arises. The Roman Empire is gone. Jews were abused in Spain, France, and England because the Roman Catholic Church is based on Christianity. It has all the power. It controls the kings. Eventually, Henry VIII bans all Jews from England. The Spanish Inquisition was torturing them to death unless they converted to Christianity. And only one country opened up their arms to the Jewish race, and that was Germany, who would gladly take their talents. There's another weird thing of the Middle Ages is banking arises in the Middle Ages. The Crusades caused trade again in the Middle Ages, and for trade you must have banking. The Catholic Christian Church declared the charging of interest a sin. It would only be Christian charitable to loan people money interest-free if they needed it. And so not everyone can go into banking in the Middle Ages. This is all a little controversial because this is what leads to stereotypes, even though it's history. Don't let it suck you into the stereotypes. Some Jewish people were able to become bankers in Germany in the Middle Ages. And anybody that goes into banking is going to get rich. You guys know credit cards are the devil. It's because there's high interest rates. They're very profitable to banks. They try to give you credit cards and they make money off of you. That is what banking does. They make money off of you borrowing money. Anybody going into the banking business, if they do it well, they're going to get rich. Industrial Revolution comes along. If you had money already, basic rule of economics, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, wouldn't you take your money as a banker and invest it in the Industrial Revolution so you can get ever richer? And so as time goes on, by the time the end of World War I comes, it's easy for Hitler to argue that Germany was stabbed in the back by the factories and the banks, which were owned by Jews. Not totally true. There's a lot of stereotyping there. Definitely some racism there. But he's able to pitch that argument at these speeches and convince the World War I veteran that Jews were the problem. They had come to Germany with a conspiracy to take over Germany, and at the height of German power, they stabbed Germany in the back to topple Germany so that eventually they can totally take over. It sounds crazy, but you've grown up in an era where politicians say very wacky stuff just to get votes. And so more soldiers would show up to these Nazi party meetings at the beer hall in southern Germany. It reached a point where Hitler got a second job. So we could not only make the posters, but rent bigger venues. You rent a hall, like the Elks Lodge or the KC Hall, where you can pack in more people for the speech. Then you start renting things like the Pack, theaters, where more and more people can pack into these things. Then you start passing a hat. If everybody throws in $1, you can rent bigger and bigger places. Eventually, everybody that's coming week after week knows the Hitler speech, so he's able to get a few people to give the speech for him. Like his henchman here, the top one is Goebbels. He's one of Hitler's very, very first followers. Goebbels could give the speech in one town, while Hitler gave the speech in another town, and they slowly start spreading this out through every major city in Bavaria, which is one southern German state. Not all of Germany, one southern German state. This is Himmler, another true believer and follower. He's the root behind the SS, the actual hardcore death camp kind of guys. This is Goering, who is a World War I fighter pilot. So he truly believes in Hitler. These guys are willing to help spread the word throughout Germany. And the movement just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. They're getting more money. They're becoming a legitimate political party. And then Hitler has this grand idea. Why don't we just take over the government of Bavaria? And he plans the beer hall push. Push is the German word for overthrowing the government, the French coup d'etat. Um, in 1923, Hitler and his Nazis try to overthrow the government of Bavaria. Just the government of Bavaria. They believed they had the backing of the army in Bavaria, and they had the great World War I general Ludendorff on their side, who sticks with the plan, but the army bails out on Ludendorff. So when they launch their attempt to overthrow the government, the actual push, the plans take over radio stations, newspapers, and military barracks, of course. It all fails in the end. Hitler was at the forefront. He was actually wounded. He did not cower down. Hitler, it always sounds like I'm defending Hitler. He was no coward. He actually fought in this thing and took a bullet to the arm, saving a child from getting shot by the defenders of the German government. I'm not defending Hitler. I'm just saying that he was no hypocrite. He was always in the forefront of these battles. And the whole thing just collapses, and the leaders are all arrested. Now, they've committed a major crime here. They've committed the crime of treason, and they have to go to trial for this. And this is a major turning point for Hitler in a couple ways. Typically, wow, this is so much more fun when you have a class. You can ask questions, have some back and forth. Typically here I'd ask them, well, what's the typical punishment for treason? Well, it's death. Treason is the only crime mentioned in the United States Constitution. And the penalty in almost every country for treason is death, execution, because you are threatening the very social contract of our society. So Hitler goes to trial for treason with his core henchmen of the Nazi Party. It becomes the trial of the century in Germany. Radio is there. Radio is broadcasting it. And rather than defend himself on the stand, every time Hitler got to speak, he would give the speech how Germany was stabbed in the back, and the German veterans fought 4 years to get stabbed in the back by the bankers and the factory owners and the democratic government. And the trial spreads his message through all of Germany. It makes Hitler ever more popular. In the end, he was absolutely found guilty and sentenced to 5 years of prison. Gasp. Everybody gasped. Only 5 years of prison. Why would they sentence Hitler to only 5 years of prison? Think about who these guys were. If a meth-addicted, heroin-shooting crackhead in North St. Louis desperately stole their grandmother's handgun and came down to the road station in St. Genevieve, shot the attendant, and stole $300 to buy more meth, heroin, and crack, and they're found passed out under a bridge and they're arrested, they go to trial for murder. Typically also a death penalty offense. Versus, say, a St. Genevieve graduate who was a leader of their class, a Stuco member, an NHS member, chooses to not go to college but enlist in the army in about 2008 and go off to war. Their life dream is to go to Afghanistan and fight the war on terror and destroy terrorists. And they do so for 5 years, and they suffer all the physical and mental wounds of going off to war. Then they come back to St. Genevieve. Their army career is ended because of wounds and physical injuries there. They're not even allowed to serve anymore, even though they want to. So they come back to good old St. Genevieve, get married, and have twins. Needs a job to support his family. Looks around for a job. Left high school, never went to college. Went straight in the army. Has one skill: how to kill people. Not a going thing in St. Genevieve. And so they find the best job they can in St. Genevieve. Dairy Queen right now, since McDonald's is not hiring. And so he's working at Dairy Queen, trying to make a living for his twins. Becomes so desperate. Food is expensive for babies. Formula is expensive. Diapers are expensive. Everything about babies is expensive. Daycare is super expensive if both parents are trying to work. I peaked out about $10,000 a year in daycare expenses when I had younger children before school. And so this veteran gets frustrated, takes his pistol down at the road station, shoots the attendant, and steals $300. Goes straight to the police station after giving the money to his wife to support the twins. Goes straight to the police station and turns himself in. These two guys have a trial on the same day. Do you think they're going to get equal sentences? The crackhead, he's going to death row. He is going to die in prison. The war hero veteran just trying to support his kids, yes, he killed somebody. But he's not going to prison like the crackhead. He's probably going to go down for manslaughter. He's probably going to do a solid 7 years in prison. But that's a big difference. What I'm drawing here is an analogy. Hitler and his guys were war heroes. They were veterans of the German nation. No judge is going to sentence them to death after trying to overthrow the government of Bavaria. They're sentenced to 5 years. Hitler is out in less than a year on parole for his outstanding behavior in prison. And it's in prison where he has the grand epiphany of how to take over the German government. It is in prison where Hitler has the grand epiphany on how to take over the German government. And that's where I leave you in suspense.